I found out after the fact that you and Wayne Watson and Bruce Carroll had done a show together up in Vail, Colorado. I'm like, had I known, I would have changed all of my schedule to be there
Oh,
and
shoot.
hang out with you guys.
Well, it was a one-off thing that Bruce did, and I'm telling you, we had so much fun. I can't even tell you. In fact, you've probably been around musicians and stuff enough to know that when you go out and you go on tour, you kind of develop a little of your own kind of like family shorthand and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We had one date, and I already had like a half a page of like Bruce Wayne and Bob glossary terms for like inside jokes and all kinds of goofing around that we
Oh,
did.
especially those two, man. I've toured with both of them, and I still something from either Bruce or Wayne pops out of my mouth every now and then.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
incredible.
It was so we're hoping to come up with the flimsiest of reasons to do something like that again because we just had such a good time.
Yeah, I would think so. Well, again, I hate I missed it, but if you guys ever do it again, man, I'm hopping on a plane or jumping in a 12-hour car ride. I'll come hang out with you.
Very cool.
Just, but I have to say, Bob, this is a thrill for me because I consider you one of the great singer-songwriters in the history of the genre. And songs like Come and See and Mountain Cathedral. And I mean, those are songs that just stick with me throughout the passages of time of not just well-written songs, but just the way that you were able to deliver a song, the way that you were able to get in the studio and create these moments that just made your heart explode. And I know
Oh,
you're still out there doing it. You're still writing. You're still singing. And I'm just excited to hear your as much of the stories you want to tell today. So welcome,
absolutely.
welcome to the One Degree of Andy podcast, Bob Bennett. Man,
Thank you.
what a thrill to sit down with you today.
Well, as we're talking here, we're finishing up the mixes on a brand new album.
Wow.
So I'm excited to say that I've got 12 new songs coming out, hopefully before Christmas. Although the
Uh-huh.
rush to get things out now that we don't sell little discs anymore,
Yeah.
it's a different world out there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. The
I'm probably
manufacturing
gonna.
time, we don't have the manufacturing time that we used to.
That's right. There's no
Yeah.
lead in. You put the thing up. So
Hmm.
I'm gonna put the title song out there called "Everlasting Day," and let that sit there for about 2 weeks, and then release the whole album, and we'll see what happens.
And did you say you were in Canada, uh,
Yes,
putting this together?
there's a fellow. If you know your deep dive CCM stuff, there was a Canadian duo called Salmon and Mulder
Okay.
back in the day. And Roy is a producer, engineer, multi-instrumentalist, one of those guys who does way too many things good. You kind of love him and hate him all at the same time
Yeah, I know people
just,
like that.
for just how talented he is.
Yeah.
And he's been my recording partner in crime since we worked together on my Christmas album back in 2010.
Hmm.
So anyway, I was up in Surrey, British Columbia, right outside Vancouver,
Oh, wow.
and doing our last 3 weeks of recording.
Tough place to be late summer, huh?
Yeah, well, I got what we used to call the studio tan. You remember that? You were
Yep.
inside so much, you hardly see the sun. You're in
Yeah.
working all day long, but it was great. It
Yeah.
was a great run.
The sun like attacks you when you come out. You're like, oh, I haven't been
Oh,
out. I haven't been
oh,
outside in five
there are
days.
people out here.
Yeah.
You know?
That's awesome. Yeah, you don't just have to go to Nashville anymore. You don't have to go to LA anymore. You don't have to, there are these places where back when we were doing our thing, you had to be in Nashville. You had to kind of be in the hub of where all the musicians were and the producers were and the labels were and that's where everything happened. But, obviously over the last 20 to 30 years, and it's just been they're great studios, great musicians, and you can do things so much quicker in different places that I think it's kind of cool to say I recorded this album in Canada. I think that's got a
Yeah,
story all of its own that you can add to the liner notes.
yeah. I love doing it, and it's yes. I mean, the fact that you can, if you know what you're doing, and that's an important caveat. But if you know what you're doing, you can do an album on your MacBook Pro
Hmm.
and make it sound pretty doggone good.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But we still need the pros. I mean, I've been a part of those MacBook, songs before, or, the young guys that have their own gear in the studio and like they're good at what they do, but there's something about getting around these masters that have
Well,
have just been studio dogs for
they've
decades. That
forgotten more than you and I will ever know
yeah,
about some of this stuff. You know
that's
what I
right.
mean?
That's right. Well, let's get into your career. You know, you were man. I just remember Bob Bennett being such a name when I got into the industry in the well, really for him got into the early '90s. And you're just I'm not gonna say you were the old guard, but you're a little bit older than
No,
me,
I mean,
maybe
let's be
10 years,
honest.
but
Let's be honest. I'd been around for a little bit by then.
uh-huh.
By music business standards, I'd certainly been around for a while. In
Yeah.
actual history standards, it was a finger snap.
Yeah.
But you know, all these years later, I am grateful, and I think it's kind of cool. I get lumped in with all the pioneer guys.
Yeah, I can see
The
that.
truth is, if you go down that laundry list of people, you think of Phil Keaggy and Randy Stonehill, Larry Norman, second chapter of Acts, Mustard Seed Faith, Phil Keaggy. These guys had already been there and done that when I showed up in the late 70s. So I'm their kind of like their younger brother. But all these years later, I get lumped in with all those guys because I lasted long enough.
That's a good
I was
thing.
initially,
Yeah.
all you have to do is just last long enough, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden, you're not an old guy, you're a classic.
Yeah.
So,
Or it comes back around. Everything comes back
I
around at some
was,
point. Yeah.
and I initially was involved with Calvary Chapel, sort of
Oh,
during the
wow.
Don't Miss the Rapture 70s.
Uh-huh.
And eventually got to playing their Saturday night concerts and got associated with Maranatha Music back before they turned into the Praise Music Company, which was a big deal.
Hmm.
They actually had individual artists that they signed and nurtured and so forth, and I was one of those guys. And so I did my first album back in '79 for them. And you'll appreciate this. I always said that over the course of my career, I wanted to make sure that I had a different label for every album so that there was absolutely no career momentum whatsoever. So I could have the joy of starting over every darn time. So that's how it kind of worked out for me.
Incredible. Incredible. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned some of these names, and I think of, when I think of you and your music, I think of Michael Card and,
Yes.
John Michael Talbot and Terry Talbot and
Yeah, and
uh,
those are such great names to be. And
yeah.
and before, here's the funny thing, Andy. Before I ever knew those guys and got to hang around with some of them stuff, I worked at a record store in Southern California, just your regular old California record store and head shop, because back when you could still get that done.
Yeah.
And I was a brand new Christian, and I would stay away from like selling, guys would go in and go, "Is that a good bong?" And I would know that it was. But I was a Christian now, so I would go, go talk to Jack about that. I can answer any music questions you might have. So my best friend in this world is a guy named Dan Rupel. And the Dan Rupel was half of the well, actually three guys that founded a comedy team called Isaac Air Freight back in the
Oh,
day.
yeah. Yeah, of course.
Isaac Air Freight, for you folks who may not know, was sort of like when Saturday Night Live meets the gospel. What is that comedy like?
Hmm.
That's kind of what they did. They didn't just say funny things. They actually did sketch comedy and set pieces like that. So Dan and I were working in this store, and we had a better Christian music section in this store than the Bible bookstore did down the street because we were engaged. We were ordering everything in. We were listening to everything we could get our hands on.
Yeah.
And so I sold all those albums. I remember when Mason Prophet then became Terry and John Michael Talbot and the Talbot Brothers Reborn album and the first the Barry McGuire stuff that I heard.
Yeah.
I listened to Barry McGuire back when he was a folk guy. That's how
Wow.
old I am. I knew Barry McGuire pre-Eve of Destruction.
Yeah, but I'd say before he got weird. Yeah.
That's how old I am now. But it was very cool. So I got to know all these people on their records, and then through a wonderful turn of events, I got to know many of them as pals and sort of fellow travelers.
Well, let's back up a little bit though. You said when you were a new Christian, working in a record store. Tell me about your salvation experience.
Well, I don't mean to be cutesy when I say this, but there is a story involved here, and you'll understand what I get to when I get
Okay.
to it.
Okay.
But I was raised Roman Catholic, and unlike a lot of people, I'm not going to say a bunch of bad, predictable stuff about that. There's a lot of things they didn't tell me. Obviously, there's a different emphasis on many things. But I went to public school, sort of catechism when I was a kid. I had my first Holy Communion. I had my first, confirmation. And even though I didn't know all of the details and didn't understand the gospel as well as I would later, seeds were definitely planted, and I knew that something big was going on. I just didn't know how big.
Yeah.
So when your parents force you to go to church when you're a kid, of course, the first thing you do when you've got choice is to completely opt out.
Yeah, that's right.
So I got far away from church. And at the same time that I pulled away from church and religion and all that, just by some amazing coincidence, God's opinions started to kind of resemble mine a lot. And because I was actually sort of creating him in my image
Yeah. Yeah.
now. And so I had a few years where I was definitely at arm's length, and I knew there was a God, but I wanted to do what I wanted to do. So if we fast forward to my 22nd birthday, my roommate was Dan Ruppel, my best friend, still to this day.
Uh-huh.
And he was kind of going on, even at age, he was younger than me, he was 21. But even at that tender young age, he was kind of going on kind of a spiritual quest, like there has to be something more to what's going on. What do I do? He actually kind of went buffet shopping. He checked out the Baha'i guys because we love seals and groffs, right?
Yeah,
He
right.
checked
Right.
out Spiritism because his uncle was in Spiritism. Just to cover the bases, he pulled down his these and thous King James off the shelf and said, I kind of get this, but I'm not getting it. So I don't know how he found out about it or whatever, but he went out and bought a Good News for Modern Man. A Good News for Modern Man back in the day was kind of the gold standard of English versions of the Bible. I
Right.
don't even think there was a living Bible then. But this was like, I can understand what they're saying now a
Yeah.
lot, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And so he started reading Good News for Modern Man, and I started reading the New Testament. I was curious, and what happened to me is I said to myself, all of the beef that I have with religion has nothing to do with Jesus. It's about the folly and the misbehavior and the weirdness of human beings,
Mm.
which, if you think about it, is kind of always the
Yep.
case,
Still
whether
the
you're
same
saved or
thing
not.
today. That's
It's
right.
always about trying to keep company with people who are just as flawed and nuts as
Yeah.
you are.
That's right.
And so without really knowing what I was doing, not having a whole lot of language to it, I gave my heart to the Lord. I started attending the Calvary Chapel in Downey, which
Hmm.
is where I grew up, hometown of the Carpenters, location of the first Taco Bell. A lot of
Oh,
great stuff
wow.
coming out of
Man, you're
Downey at
talking
the
my
time.
language now. Carpenters
Yeah,
and
sure.
Taco Bell. I mean, that's my childhood. Yeah.
And so I started attending the church. So here's the part that's going to sound cutesy, but it's real to me. A couple things happened. I became a born again Christian a few days after my 22nd birthday, or that was the day that God called in the marker
Mm.
that he'd been holding for many years.
Mm.
In other words, he'd had his eyes on me, and the Holy Spirit was chasing me down for a long time before he landed the deal. And because I know that there was a demarcation in my faith life and in my awareness of salvation, and I think that's necessary. I don't know if you can necessarily, I mean, I wouldn't fight and die on this, but I don't know if you can, people go, gee, I don't know if I'm saved or not. That's a little bit of a shaky ground to me, but I wouldn't necessarily, say God can't do what he's going to do somehow.
Yeah, right. God's
But
undefeated, right?
yeah, I mean, he knows what he's doing and he knows how to
Hmm.
keep score on all these things. But I just came to an awareness that I'd never had before. And I said, look, I need to follow after the Lord. I need to quit messing around here. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah, and you talk about your journey after you decided you weren't going to church anymore, but yet you were still on a spiritual journey, trying to find these other things
Yes,
that that was filling something. You're trying to fill something inside of you. And I don't, there's a case to be made for predestination. It's also a dangerous road to go down, but it just does feel like that, for so many of us that went on this musical journey, that there was a code of God written on our DNA, that was like, we're
absolutely.
gonna find it at some point. And God lets us go on these journeys for a certain amount of time so that we're actually the stew is ready once he does get a hold of us, and then we're ready to go do this next thing that he wants us to do.
And one of the linchpins of my coming to faith was we were the store Licorice Pizza for you Southern California aficionados. In order to stop shrinkage and stealing within the store, you could actually check out records like a library and take them home and listen to them, and then take them back and throw them in the defect pile. So of course I got to listen to everything humanly possible at bargain basement prices.
Yeah.
And but what did it for me is there's a song on Phil Keaggy's second album, Love Broke Through, called "As the Ruin Falls,"
Mm.
which is based on a poem by C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
And when I heard Phil's rendition of that song, I just threw up my hands and says, "Oh Lord, that's me." In the song, Lewis says, I'm paraphrasing, that I want God and everybody else to serve my turn. In other words, it was basically, I'm just one selfish guy. So if you would have come to me and said, you have a sin problem, you're out of fellowship with the Lord, you need the cross, you need forgiveness, I might not have been able to be on board with all that stuff because I still graded on the curve. But if you came to me and said, Bob Bennett, you are one self-centered, selfish guy, and that is sin, it's like in basketball. I raise my hand, yes, that is my foul, you know.
Wow.
And so music, and then a few years later, I met him and got a chance to tell him that.
Oh, wow.
So that was a very cool thing.
Yeah. And he's kind of a standoffish guy. Like, he doesn't want to hear those stories. No.
Well, he's the
He's the best.
I keep kidding him
best.
about it. I said, what makes you qualified to be a Phil Keaggy is that you don't know you're Phil Keaggy.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
it's like, you know, because I kid him all the time about this. Like, when he plays and I'm in the room and he does stuff, I just laugh. I laugh out loud because, like,
Yeah.
never in a million years. He just does something, and I go, listen to that.
Yeah. Oh, well, when I had him on the podcast several episodes back, we handed him a guitar and he
Yeah.
just started playing. And I mean, it was like the room stood still. I mean, it was just like
I know,
this is
I know.
the presence of greatness. And then he finished and he went, yeah, will you cut that out? I'm like, well, he said, that wasn't my guitar. And I didn't feel really
No.
great about it. And I'm like,
No.
no, I didn't, because I'm in the presence of greatness right now. I want everyone else to experience that. Well, we cut it out because he asked us to. But I got to tell you, going back to Phil, Phil was the first guy when I started doing these podcasts, that when we got done doing the podcast, he said, hey, you want to go grab lunch? You want to go hang out a little bit?
Oh, beautiful.
And I'm like, you're asking me, it's one of my heroes, you know, just saying, hey, let's go grab lunch. There's a place down the
Well,
street. I'm like,
I eat recreationally, so if we were in the same city, we'd be doing that after this.
I would hope so. I would hope so. Well, so let's talk about, so that's your conversion experience. Let's talk about how that met with your musical acumen. Like, were you playing music
Yes.
at a younger age? Where did
Yeah, I started playing guitar when I was 10 years old. I drafted off of my older brother's folk music collection, pre-Beatles, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That's what gave me the love for acoustic guitar and writing and singing, and, you know, camped out next to the family record player listening to Kingston Trio records. I mean, that was my childhood. And by the time we got to when I was approaching my 20s, I wanted to be James Taylor or Paul Simon or Jackson Brown Jr. or, you know, these were all my heroes, Joni Mitchell.
Mm-hmm. I can hear a lot of James Taylor in your music. Yeah.
Well, I mean, anybody of my era, it's just a question of not do you hear James Taylor, it's how well am I hiding it?
Exactly. What is that? The old saying of good artists steal, great artists know how to cover their tracks.
Yeah, he's such a seismic influence on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, as Roy and I were mixing this record, we were talking about, you know, I asked Roy a question. I said, if as you begin to approach mixing my record, do you have a recording or two that is kind of your North Star for what you think this should be mixed like? And he, without even pausing, he calls up a song called September Grass off JT's October Road, and he plays the song and he goes, this is the mix. I go, oh, yeah, okay. Oh, sure.
Yeah, then have at it, bro. You just have at
You
it.
know, I just, if anyone wants to dig deeper on this, when COVID started, Yo-Yo Ma, who is a incredible cellist and a pal of JT's, was doing songs when we're all in COVID lockdown, and the hashtag was Songs of Comfort. So James borrowed his hashtag and was doing a few songs. Then it eventually morphed into JT fan covers. And so James Taylor and he has an excellent social media team. I mean, these guys, I want to be like them when I grow up. They were getting a hold of and posting these fan covers of his songs
Yeah.
on social media. And I thought, it's not that I don't know how to follow instructions or anything, but I want to write my own songs. So I wrote a song in tribute to James Taylor called When JT Plays and Sings. And I recorded that song and uploaded it to YouTube, and they uploaded it to his Instagram channel.
Wow.
And here's a guy who wrote this really fun song. And so if your listeners go to YouTube and put in my name, When JT Plays and Sings, you'll hear my little James Taylor tribute song, and how much fun it was. I don't know if the man himself ever heard it.
That's what I was going to ask.
I know that people around him that are working with him definitely heard it. That was kind of fun.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you've ever gotten to meet him or meet any of these guys that
No, I would
really
say
influenced you.
I did meet. I've gotten to say hi to Bruce Coburn a couple times. That was a seismic thing.
Yeah.
Also, there is a wonderful guy who is obscure to some and absolutely well known to others. A fellow named Mac McAnally.
Oh yeah.
Mac is country music musician of the year for years on end. Produces everybody. Played with the Coral Reefer Band forever and a day. Is now touring with a Buffett kind of a tribute show, which I saw at the Troubadour a couple months ago.
Oh wow.
He's been a longtime hero of mine. And one day, a dear pal of mine, she's gone on, God bless her, but she arranged a time for Mac and I to meet at her house, and we traded songs back and forth on guitar. And then he took me to lunch, and it was just like, it was so hard for me to not be fanboy in front of Mac.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he's just that good.
Wow. That's so cool. I think those are little side hugs from God sometimes, just to go, hey, I got a little gift for you here. This is gonna, I don't know. I don't know why he does it and does it sometimes, and sometimes he doesn't. But again, I just think sometimes God just drops those things in our lives to go, hey, fun. You're doing a great job.
It's I mean, this is kind of a, I don't walk around and walk around and go, hey, you know who I am? Because I 99.9% of the time I live my life in total anonymity.
Yeah, I get that.
But every once in a while, someone will come up to me in the grocery store and go, are you Bob Bennett, that singer guy? And my first question is, do I owe you money? And, and it's always sweet when it happens. But I come home and I tell my wife, Elena, with a wink, I always go and I go, honey, I was out shopping and there was a me sighting. But I have the same thing. I mean, if I get to hang out with Richie Furay or I get to hang out with Mac McAnally or with some of these guys, I am total fanboy.
Yeah.
I am like, I am not worthy.
Which I think is so cool still at our age that, we can start to meet some of our heroes and realize, man, they're just like us. They they have personal lives and they have stories and, they're just doing the next thing. They're just, whatever opportunity comes their way and they're really good at it, but they're really
my batting average is pretty good because I've never really met anybody where I kind of walked away and said, well, they're a lot better at their craft than they are personality wise. I've had a really good batting average. Everybody I've met has been pretty doggone cool.
Yeah, I would have to say the same thing. Well, let's talk about when you started your Christian music journey. So did you had you already been writing music before you got saved, or tell me about that journey?
Lots of unrequited woe is me, sensitive singer-songwriter songs and stuff, pouring out of me.
Yeah.
And, channeling my inner Dan Fogelberg and, stuff like that. So, I mean, if you listen to some of my earlier recordings, you might catch a hint of me when I was still trying to get out of my Kenny Loggins wannabe phase.
Yeah.
I think I found my own voice pretty well, but yeah, so it seemed like the most natural thing in the world to just start writing about what was happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that there was a thing called Christian music because of the albums that were in the store, Dan and I would drive down to the mothership at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, where they were doing the Saturday night concerts,
Right.
and we saw those guys. And so we knew something was happening. It wasn't a big genre, you know, let's choose a career path thing like it is now.
Yeah.
But so, but it just seemed like the most natural thing for me you know, start writing songs about what I was starting to find out.
Uh-huh. And then who like where was your connection to like get into the industry? Like who discovered you, or what relationship did you make that was
Well, I started playing the Saturday night concerts at Costa Mesa, and they were hosted by a guy named Jim Kempner at the time.
uh-huh.
That brought, and also, they did a very cool thing back in the day, and not many people know this at Costa Mesa. They started a musicians fellowship. Well, that musicians fellowship, the guy that was on staff there has now been the senior pastor of Calvary Chapel, Merritt Island for like decades. Half of Malcolm and Alwyn, right? When our guys were inventing the wheel over in England, Malcolm and Alwyn were inventing the wheel.
Yeah.
And so Malcolm was teaching a musicians fellowship and had a bunch of us gathered together in the fellowship hall and basically was whispering in our ears, you're going to be seduced by a lot of fame and a lot of money and a lot of stuff, and they're going to try to convince you you're somebody that you're not. Don't forget that there's ministry involved here. Don't forget
That's good.
what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah, that's great.
And so that was a really great word really early on for me.
Mm-hmm.
Then I came to the attention of Tommy Coombs. Okay, legendary love
Love
song.
song, yeah.
He worked at Maranatha Music and did A&R and stuff for them, and he's the one who said, "Hey, kid, there might be a place for you here." You know, so he's very much. I don't know that many other people at Maranatha were overwhelmed by what I did, but he was enough to. His enthusiasm was enough to get me through the door, and I'll
Who
take
was
it.
on the label? Who's on the label at that time when you
Oh my
when you
goodness!
signed?
Back in the day, well, there were the early people. There was like Mustard Seed Faith, Karen
Hmm.
Lafferty, Seek Ye First, Karen Lafferty,
Yeah.
um, Eric Nelson, who was a real mentor to me in the very beginning. I'm trying to think else. Bethlehem,
Yeah.
Aslan,
Yeah.
some of those guys. Daryl Mansfield, Gentle Faith, Parable. Um, you know, those were the. Eventually, it was kind of in my graduating class. Leon Patillo, Kelly Willard,
Wow.
those people.
Wow. Kelly's got I think she's got one of the great voices of all time.
I,
Just
I can still remember when I first heard Paul Clark's Hand of the Plow, which is where most people listened to Hand of the Plow and went, "Who is that woman singing? What's up with that?" And that's how I first got to know her
mm,
before her first album ever happened.
yeah.
I absolutely fell in love with her voice, and then eventually fell in love with her. She's such a
Oh,
doll.
oh wow. Well, what was your first big single? Like what introduced you to Christian
Well,
radio
for
and
me, you know, I don't know that anything really hit per se. Carpenter Gone Bad got a little bit of airplay. I did a version of the old classic Lutheran hymn, I Know That My Redeemer Lives.
hmm
And I think that might have gotten some airplay on what then, we didn't know to call it praise and worship format, but that's probably what they would have been doing.
yeah.
And so I got a little bit of airplay there. I really didn't get too much radio action until the second album. And then when Come and See came out, that one got some consistent airplay and started to chart a little bit.
Yeah. And then you had some really great touring opportunities as well. I mean, I just remember seeing your name on some of the biggest tours during the late 80s and early 90s.
Well, the first one was a big fluke. I still tell this story with a smile because it's been a great story for 30 plus years now. I played a tiny little church in the Denver area, and Amy Grant was in town on the first portion, her summer portion of the Unguarded tour back in the
Yeah.
summer of '85. And she showed up to this concert. I'd never met her. Everybody was like, I had lunch with Amy Grant. I played tennis with Amy Grant. I lubed a car with Amy Grant. I mean, everybody knew Amy Grant. I did not know Amy Grant. My joke was, I want to meet Amy Grant. Will you guys help me out here? Help a guy out, won't you? So she showed up to this concert. I'm so glad I didn't know she was in the audience. And she showed up, And eventually, her enthusiasm and her husband at the time, Gary Chapman,
Uh-huh.
a dear pal, were enthusiastic enough about what they were hearing that they asked me to come and open up. And it was a little bit, anytime you open up for a huge artist in a large situation, you have the potential to kind of be the sacrificial lamb.
Sure.
And that kind of happened to me. I mean, what I tell people is there was absolutely zero change in different ambient audience noise from before the lights went down, when the lights went down, when they introduced me, when I played, when the lights went back, when I exited. It was just one big where's Amy
Yeah.
and where's my seat.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
so I got killed, but but that which doesn't kill me, worked out. So it was a pretty cool deal, and they
Yeah.
were insanely kind to me, the people on the tour.
Yeah.
But I thought, and this was my bad, I thought I had touched the hem of the leopard skin print coat
Yeah.
thing, and that career virtue was going to flow out of her toward me, and that's it. I toured with Amy Grant, and get ready, my ship has arrived. Well, as it turned out, while I was waiting for my ship to arrive, I was sitting next to a phone in an airport, and nothing happened. It was possible to do something really cool, and on paper something that was seemed really big, and it didn't go beyond that. It didn't go beyond the thing itself very far.
And that is such a common feeling, or it happened to a lot of us, that you think this is okay, this is it. This is where I take the next step. This is where I blow up. This is what puts my career on another level. And when it doesn't happen, man, it is so discouraging as an artist because your whole yeah, you want to be faithful and write the songs and you want to satisfy that artist itch in yourself, but you also want to sell records, right? You want to get singles
Yeah,
on the radio because that furthers your career. And the more money you can make, the less you got to tour and harder you got to work. And I mean, it doesn't always happen that way, but you
yeah,
understand where I'm going is that those things can be they can be heart killers, because you then you can go, well, then what do I have to do if being on tour with Amy doesn't take me to the next level, then
yeah.
where do I go from there? So what did happen after
Well,
that?
I mean, I would like to think that I have gotten far enough down the line to see this as I have this phrase that I talk about that when the right thing happens the wrong way. You get fired from a job, it's unfair. You totally got nailed, but you shouldn't have been. But the door opens for you to go do something that
Right.
you never would have done otherwise.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean that the bad thing was swell. It just means that the Lord is good at outmaneuvering these bad
Hmm.
circumstances sometimes and
Amen.
setting you in the direction you need to go. So I think that's what happened to me. I was not meant to be Jackson Browne in an arena. I was meant to be Bob Bennett at a house concert with 45 people.
Yeah.
That was the life I was supposed to live, artistically and otherwise. And once I realized that was the program, it also made me realize, I tell young artists if I don't have an opportunity to mentor as much as I wish I did, but I will tell them, you have to remember every gig is Carnegie Hall.
Mm.
If you're in front of 25 people in a 1,500 seat church and it feels awkward, you gather those 25 people on the first pew, you sing for them, you give it your all. You give
Amen.
them a night that no one else is going to give them that night.
Yeah.
And yes, is the energy different when you got 5,000 people that are into it? Of course it's different. But your effort is never different. Your commitment to folks is never different. And so, that's what happened to me.
Well, but you have to be okay with that too. I mean, if you want the sooner you can accept that this is probably who I am and what my journey is going to be, then you can lean into it a little more. And it doesn't mean you give up the hopes and dreams of some of the other stuff, but you also be realistic and go, and it's still even where we all got to, it's one in a million that you're gonna get to that next place. I mean,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, you think
I'm
about
already,
it. Yeah, you think about it, you look back and you go, there's Amy, there's Michael, Stephen Curtis. I mean, that was, and there were some other groups towards the top that came and went, but who has lasted on that level that can still command that size audience and respect? It was just kind of those three. And so you work your way through the industry and you go, okay, we've had good runs. Somebody's had really good runs. but we never were going to achieve that next level that the people we kind of looked up to as the gold standard were going to achieve. And
And
that
there
you
were
have
a
to be
lot
okay with that. Yeah.
there were a lot of good people. They gave me a shot I would have never had. I would
Hmm.
never, you know, shake my finger at that. The only thing I've said over the years that I wish I'd known then is what I kind of know now is that at least as it was, it's like I'm an expert at reading yesterday's headlines here,
Hmm.
but the music business as it was pretty much predicated on the same rules and guiding principles as the regular music business, except
Yeah.
that the people involved were Christians.
Hmm.
What happened is you tended to believe that because the brethren were involved, that there were going to be some things that were decidedly different. When you came to find out that those things were not decidedly different, you could get your heart broken because we sometimes in the church have a habit of speaking the language of mystery when what we really are talking is the language of business. For
Yeah.
instance, it makes perfect sense for a record company to say, we're going to figure out whether or not you're going to make another record by how many you sold before. Have we recouped? Is it a good investment? Are you out there touring? Are you getting radio airplay? They sit and they run the numbers. So the hey bro, you're God's chosen guy, that's usually only coterminous with the contract.
Yeah.
And if you allow yourself to only hear the hey brother part and don't understand that we're operating in the this is business, you're going to get killed. And so it's not that there's anything wrong with people making money. Yes, you're signing contracts that would make the IRS blush. You know, you know,
Yeah.
it's kind of a crazy thing. But there were some key people along the way that really believed in me against all, probably against all better judgment,
Yeah.
truthfully.
Who were those
Believed
people?
in me enough to give me a chance. I mean, Tommy Coombs, Daryl Harris, and Wayne Donahue, as they
Mm.
were constituted back
Yeah.
at Star Song at the time, Philip Sandiford at Urgent Records,
Hmm.
Michael Card took a big leap with me in some places, and so these are guys that kind of did it for the love of me instead of what the numbers said on their calculator.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it. Again, you talk about, having the chance to every now and then mentor an artist. I do the same thing. And, again, I have so many great friends from the music industry that worked at the labels and still in great contact with them today. But as a whole, you can't make the mistake of thinking these are our friends and brothers in arms. They're with us through thick and thin. And it's just
They're
not,
they're
it's
they're your pals at Kroger, but they may not be your pals on Music Row.
exactly.
That's just the way it works out, and
Yeah.
you can't blame them for doing their.
No, no, no.
I just wish we were a little bit more upfront about what we're doing and how we're doing it,
Yeah.
so that you know what you're getting into.
Yeah. Well, when it's based on a concept of we're spreading the gospel through music and we're behind these artists that are giving you something that's different lyrically than you're hearing on secular radio, you
Hmm.
set it up in a way that, hey, we're all on the same team here. And again, I don't want to badmouth the industry, but it's
No, no, no.
or bash it, but it is what it was, and we all have the same story. Every single one of us was that it turned into a business faster than we realized it would. Because if you were like me, it's a handshake and out on the road and like, oh, they really like us. They're really supporting us. They'll do anything for us until it comes time for the next contract or the next option or when we audit them, and then it becomes a completely different relationship, and you realize, okay, this really was pretty much, it got to a point, I think, especially in the late 90s, where it was mostly a business. And, I think God deals with all that. I think God comes in and course corrects, to be honest with
Well,
you. And
and I mean, let's be honest. I wouldn't have a snowball's chance if it were now in
yeah,
the music business. I mean, let's take a large bearded acoustic guy and put a bunch of money behind him. That sounds like a great idea. Um, would not be happening. Thank you very much. So there, I got in just in time because now I can be DIY guy. I can do
yeah.
my own records. I can raise funds on GoFundMe. I can
Hmm.
release them myself. I don't need anybody in a suit to give me the thumbs up or the thumbs down.
Yeah.
I just get to go do what I can for who I can.
Yeah. Do you mind talking just a little bit about, some of the personal issues you dealt with in your
Sure,
career? Because I
sure.
know you've been open about it, and I think it's important when people listen to this to say, "Hey, he went through what I went through," or "Man, I want to know how he got through that period of his life because I'm going through it now," or
Yeah.
maybe things are heading that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I never meant to turn some of my own faults and foibles into a cottage industry, but as it turns out, you sort of write what you know. And so, a lot of people, what they'll say, the language about this is often interesting. I went through a divorce. It's almost like I caught a cold. No, the fact of the matter is I helped to dismantle a marriage.
Hmm.
And I hurt a wife and kids. And I had a lot of big failures on my resume that led to a divorce. And you know, I it's questionable whether I got what I deserved all the way down the line, but that's not really the point. It's you have to, I know that I know it took me a long time to walk the me side of the street, but I know how to do that, I think, now. And when that kind of failure is on your resume, I mean, you have plenty of company. Unfortunately, you can find plenty of your brethren who've been through this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in terms of how that interfaced with what career with a small c that I might have had, um, I didn't exactly ever get portrayed as Bob Bennett's going to sing and the clouds are going to part and the sun's going to shine through and Jesus is going to. I never got that marketing push. So when people listen to my songs and then they found out that I'm just a complete idiot, it was no surprise to anybody. I mean, I don't think they went, oh, I would have never expected that in a million years from that guy.
Gosh.
And that's not to minimize anything. I'm just saying.
Yeah. No, I get
So
you're saying.
I continued on doing. You can never figure what's being said behind your back when you can't hear it.
Right.
You can't really figure out how many phone calls you didn't get made. But what you can do is that there were certain wonderful people that just said, we know you're broken up, we know your lives fallen apart. Come and hang with us. We'll take care of you. You're not over yet, but we'll
Mm.
help you out.
Wow.
So there were some people who were very, very kind to me. I mean, they could have with great justification ridden me out of town on the rail. You know.
And that happened to so many people who went through divorces or went through substance abuse or, their lives fell apart in the public eye. And it's not that it makes it any better or any worse if you're out of the public eye, but there's just something that you're right. You do kind of wear a label for a little while as an artist if you've had that go on in your life. And, that's one thing I just love. I don't love that anyone has gone through that, but I love that we can sit here and have this conversation and just go, hey, but we're still here and God's still using us and God's still writing his songs through me. It's not over. And again, one of the tough things about the industry, especially back in the day, was, man, where's that line? Like what can you get away with and what can you not get away with as an artist and still have an audience left at the end of the day?
Yeah, and I remember hearing a story one time. This may be an apocryphal story. I have no idea. But somebody told me that they were about ready. They were reviewing a artist contract from a Christian record label and had a morals clause, right?
Yeah.
Clause that
Uh-huh.
says behavior. And the guy said, "Well, I'll be happy to sign this as long as it applies to you guys as well as it applies to me."
Ooh, wow.
And apparently, that wasn't as popular of a response as they were
Oh,
as they were looking for. And I don't absolutely. I mean, I totally understand why something like that would be there.
sure.
You know what I mean? If you're going to portray yourself as a Christian artist, and then the record company finds out 6 months down the line that you're road womanizer, then yeah, they need to have an escape hatch, of course.
Yeah.
But once they said let's everybody play by the same moral rules here, that was a little bit of I
Yeah.
always thought that was a pretty funny
Yeah.
response.
Yeah. Rules for thee, but not for me, for sure. We had that experience. I won't go into detail here 'cause I think we've done it on another podcast, but when we changed labels late in our career, we went someplace we always wanted to go. And then what we got inside the doors of that label, we were like, oh, wow. Like I had no idea people were going through all this junk in their lives and it was everywhere around us. And again, it was one of those times where like, what are we doing here? Like, what is this? What's going on? Because I do think as much as the artists, were going through things, man, the labels were Christian in name, but there wasn't a lot of I don't know. There's a lot of stuff going on inside the
Well,
labels as well. And so it just made for, again, it made for a stew that, you know, I think it kind of culminated in the early 2000s with a lot of these labels shutting down and getting sold off. And it's almost like God putting the Christian music industry into captivity for a while to start to weed this stuff down. And boom,
yeah,
here
get a little
comes
time
worship.
out.
Yeah, you get a timeout
Well,
and I'm going to do something new.
and I don't. If I say this wrong, I'm going to offend a bunch of people, and I have no wish to do that. But you can fool some of the people some of the time, and that's the danger of doing this in the way that we have
Hmm.
done it.
Hmm.
If you try to assess your own health in the faith or your own life or your own what's going on by whether or not God is still honoring your music and his word and this effect and all that, you're going to completely think you're insulated and it's okay and everything's just great because he appears to be relentlessly faithful when you're up there singing your songs. And if you're not careful, if you start to believe your own press kit, you're going to be in deep,
That's
deep
right.
trouble.
That's right.
Other people can say these things, but it's not up to me to say if you don't like my music, then there must be something wrong with your acumen in the spirit to get this stuff. That's completely craziness. My songs are not. I would like to think that the Holy Spirit has used the songs as a soundtrack. I'd like to think that's part of it. But no one is under any obligation. If they listen to me and go, "He's not my guy," that's fine. It's okay. I have no value judgments about you, your faith, how smart you are, how faithful you are, whatever. It's not a thing. I'm after, singing for the people who will understand and maybe get some encouragement. And my joke about this is whether there is an eternal consequence or whether I just kept you out of serious trouble for 3.5 minutes. It's a good job for
I
me.
like that. I like
You
that.
know?
Yeah. And I think the older we get, I don't know if you're like me, but the older I get, I value what I see as appointment. Like it's crazy all the different events that I get invited to do, and they're all so different. It's not like being on tour, it's this event or this event, and they're so radically different. And sometimes there are 12 people there. Sometimes there's 80, sometimes there's 3,000, but they're all different. And I see those now as appointments of God saying, I got one more thing for you to do. I got one more thing for you to do. Are you willing to go? Because I'm opening this door for you. And that to me, that's what I love doing now as aside from touring. People ask all the time, are you going to get back on a tour bus? You're going to get the band back together? Wouldn't you love just to go back out on tour again? I'm like, no, I actually wouldn't, because then I don't see myself as recognizing those appointments like I do now. And being in front of people that I don't think I would be in front of, if
Yeah,
I was just out on tour selling a ticket.
yeah.
Yeah. So, um, I think we got a little negative there going, about the music
No, and
industry and
I
that kind of
hope
stuff. And I,
again, I want to caution your viewers that I don't mean to be a negative Nelly here. I just think that I think it's good to talk honestly, but I'm not going to trash. I mean, I don't want to trash the whole thing because I've it would be crazy,
yeah. Oh no. Yeah.
be crazy to judge something by the worst aspects of what it is. That's not
Right.
right.
Well, we wouldn't have the catalogs we have. We wouldn't have the experience we have. We wouldn't have this body of work that we all have without it. And it was a great marriage. And I don't ever look back on it in anger or resentment at all. It's just, anytime you look under the hood, you're going to go, okay, yeah, I see some things that could have been better. Listen, I've been in church work for 25 years now, and this you could say the same thing about churches. It's the right place for us to be as believers, and we need the church. But You look under the hood too much and you get behind the scenes too much, you're going to see things that go make you go, "Oh, that's great." That's you know,
Yeah.
that really probably isn't the way things should be happening. But I digress. So let's end this on a positive direction, okay? I have a lot of my listeners. I don't typically do this on podcasts, but I've had so many of my listeners message me and say, "Can you just ask a few questions about what are your favorite songs of your career?
Oh,
What are
sure.
your favorite albums that you've worked on? Can we let's just go down that road for a minute and talk
That's
about
great. I love
some of
that.
your accomplishments?" Yeah.
Like the old Actors Studio, remember Bernard, the old questions that
Yeah. Yeah. What was
the
his
guy
name?
I forgetting his name now, but he
Yeah.
James
Yeah.
or yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
you know what I'm
James.
talking about.
Yep. We'll think of it halfway through. Probably
Yeah,
when we
yeah.
turn
When
this
we're
off.
done,
Yeah.
we both of I will think of it.
Our listeners are shouting it at us right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Favorite
So
song. What are your favorite
okay.
songs that you've been a part of?
Well, I think probably if I had to pick one song that I hope outlives me or gets heard by the most amount of people, it would be a song called "Man of the Tombs."
Mm.
And "Man of the Tombs" was a song where I was writing about me, but I was also writing about the Gadarene demoniac. And so not there's not a ton of songs in that space. I think there's more
No?
than just mine now. But I wrote that, and it actually got turned into a book. There's a guy who's now a friend of mine who wrote a book called The Stonecutter, and it's a
Yeah.
fictionalized life of this man of the tombs that culminates with his deliverance in the Gadarenes. And so it's pretty cool. But that's the one. That's the one that I think I would probably. I hope gets heard long after I've taken that next big gig.
Yeah.
I hope gets heard. Yeah.
What about when you do play for your fans and people that love your music? What are the ones they always respond to?
Come and See seems to be
Yeah,
a favorite with people. They've had some
I would think
history.
so. Yeah. Hmm.
A song about baseball. I have
Oh, I love that one. Yeah.
everybody's got even if they weren't in sports, even if their dads were perfectly terrible. As you and I know, this is the privilege of writing songs is even as you get specific in the songs, that specificity sets up the listener to fill in their own blanks for their own story.
Hmm.
So because you can't help but do it.
Right.
If I say I'm going to brush my teeth with a fluoride toothpaste and a manual toothbrush and I don't like going to the dentist, you're automatically going to go, well, I don't do that. I do this. And you're just reactive to so
Yeah.
much. And so even if a song doesn't exactly resemble what folks are going through, it reminds them that their own stories
Mm.
are happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
I had
something to
Tony
keep
Wood
in mind.
on. I had Tony Wood on, and we talked about what what makes a song great. And he kind of had the same analogy that you're writing your story, but it has the ability to change into the listener's story. They're able to
Yeah,
put themselves inside that story as well. And I've always felt that with your music, not just lyrically, but just the tone of your voice and the production of your music, where the songs go musically, has just always been something to me that I just really admired. And there are very few people ever put on earth that can do what you have done. I can't do it. I'm a vocalist. I'm a front man. Just go ahead. You write the song. Uh, you put the track together, and I'll go out and deliver the goods. And I've always held guys like you, Bob, in very high regard to to be able to go from beginning to end with a song and make it your own. And so I just want to tell you as a fan and someone who's always looked up to you. I know we've met each other in passing, but to be able to sit down and hear your story and just hear about where you are in life, I think it's just wonderful. It's been a real blessing for me today.
well, thank you. And I hope this, if you go back and reassess this before you post it, it's not like we need to have a hide the sharp object warning at the beginning. I don't know. I don't, I don't want it to be that. But I mean, we're talking the same way. If you and I were talking over coffee and stuff, this is what we'd be talking
Yeah.
about. So,
And that's always been my hope for this podcast is that I'm not coming in here asking you a bunch of questions. I mean, we start on we start on some common ground about, we saw a lot of the same things and a lot of the same people. And, it's almost like a little bit of a club that we're a part of that we can open the doors and let people in on our
I mean,
conversations.
I'm 69 years old. When I was 10 years old, I knew I wanted to do this for my entire life. I got
Hmm,
to do it. I'm getting ready to release a new album at 69 years old.
that's
I get a little
awesome.
more tired, but I'm still touring. I'm weekend warrior, get on a plane, go
Yeah.
play.
Yeah.
I'm still doing that. When COVID started in March 2020, I started a weekly live stream on YouTube and Facebook. I'm now in my fifth year of doing
Oh,
that.
that's so cool.
I do often do what I call house call concerts. If I'm in town and somebody says I have a friend who's a cancer patient or somebody who's laid up and can't come or whatever,
Hmm,
I try to make it my mission to go sing for those
I
people.
love that.
And so I get to do this thing that I love, and hopefully it will serve the people that I know God loves.
And that's assignment. I mentioned that earlier. I just feel like if God gave us this gift, I think we have to be faithful with it all the way to the end. And I just love that about you that you're like, well, tell me where to go next. Or, whatever opportunity is there, this is what you're born to do. It's what God, it's the thumbprint of God on your life to say, this is what I want you to do for my people. And again, just I said it already, but thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for being such an
Well,
inspiration to me.
well, thank you. You're on a short list of people who feel that way, and God bless you.